In 1914, after 5 months of war in Europe, a truce emerged on Christmas Day as if by magic. What drove men on both sides to disobey orders and fraternize with the enemy? Was it the simple truth that the men they were fighting were not really their enemies? If so, who or what was the real enemy? What became known as the Great War was ignited on June 28, 1914, in Sarajevo, Bosnia, when a teenager assassinated a prominent political figure and his wife. A month later, because of interlocking alliances, governments ordered their military forces to mobilize, believing the war would be an exciting adventure and a chance to prove their manliness. Young men eagerly volunteered to join the fighting, while women went to work in factories making munitions. The reality of war brought the festive atmosphere to an end. Tactics such as amassing long rows of soldiers and charging enemy positions proved suicidal, as machine guns and long-range artillery decimated the advancing troops. When British and French forces halted Germany's advance on Paris, both sides dug an elaborate system of opposing trenches, stretching some 450 miles from the North Sea through France and terminating at neutral Switzerland. From the trenches, both sides would conduct periodic raids, none of which achieved significant gains, while casualties often numbered in the thousands. Trenches were little more than ditches, exposed to constant rainfall and later snow and sleet. The ground between the opposing trenches came to be known as no man's land, where the corpses of fallen soldiers attracted scores of rats. Throughout the war, propaganda from both sides portrayed the enemy as less than human. By December, 1 million soldiers had been killed, with thousands more wounded or missing. Then on Christmas Eve, with frost covering the ground, German troops began singing Silent Night from the trenches. Here and there along the German parapet were makeshift Christmas trees adorned with lighted candles. The two sides took turns singing their favorite carols. A question hung in the air on Christmas morning. What would the troops do that day? The High Command forbade intermingling with the enemy, fearing the men would lose their fighting spirit. Peace swept over the battlefield. Not everywhere, but in many places. Up to 100,000 soldiers, including a few officers, climbed out of the ground to meet and exchange gifts with the enemy. They even managed to play a lively game of European football, using whatever they could find for a ball. The enemy, they discovered, was much like themselves. Though many of the men that day would not live to see another Christmas, the spirit of camaraderie remained alive to the end of the war. While military and civilian casualties piled up, those who had ordered and financed the war had no casualties whatsoever. And in fact, many of these men had amassed great fortunes. Among the war's disastrous outcomes was the death of honest money, as central banks inflated to keep the slaughter going and the revenue flowing. Inflation has become a nearly transparent way of financing a perpetual state of war. Let's not lay the blame on flawed human nature. Let's instead investigate a government structure that allows a few to control the fate of the many.